Hello, hello. Welcome to episode 11 of Beers with VCs, where we have casual conversations about the less talked about aspects of venture capital and startup building. We are your hosts, Sabrina Passman and Simon Lancaster, and today we are very excited to be joined by Alexey Dubov. He's an incredible 6-time founder with 2 exits under his belt, and his most recent endeavor, YC-backed Mighty Buildings, just raised $154 million in funding. Because that isn't enough, he's also an emerging manager and founding partner of Build Tech VC. We are thrilled to have you on the podcast today. Alexey, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome.
Welcome. Okay, we'll start off with what is everyone drinking today? You want to kick us off, Simon?
Yes, sure. I just got back from a short trip to Mexico, so I'm addicted to micheladas. Picked up this great mix at Costco. And quite blasphemous, but I am drinking it with 805 Firestone. So I got the mix here. I'm going to pour it and
you do a good
move
container
on to
as well. That's pretty good.
Why not Mexican beer?
I ran out of Mexican beer. I usually have some. I shared a bunch with my awesome landscaper earlier this week, so ran out.
Sharing it is the best way to enjoy Mexican beers. So that's all good. I have a purple beverage that could be wine or could be cranberry juice. You never know. But it's very delicious.
I bet it is.
Love it.
Yeah. So my beverage is chai latte with a shot of espresso.
Ooh.
I'm actually kind of like cleaning the system for the 3 months. So
it's a dirty chai.
Yeah,
Isn't that called a dirty chai?
Yeah. It's called dirty chai. Yeah.
Nice.
Delicious.
I love a good chai. Solid.
Sweet. All right, we're set up for
success. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Let's kick it off.
Let's get into
Cheers.
it. Okay, so Alexey, you're incredible. 6-time founder. You've had 6 different eureka moments for how to start a business. And with 2 exits under your belt, you are clearly good at following through. Can you tell us your formula for understanding if a company is worth building?
Well, formula is quite simple. You never know. To be frank, I mean, first of all, out of this, I count 6 as a founder. I also created a couple of service companies. I don't call them as a kind of the founder type. They're more services providing to other. But in general, I would say whenever starting something new, whenever it's your idea, it's more about if you're passionate about this problem and you want to resolve it, that's way to go. And it's less about it's still about if it's going to be successful or not. But on the other hand, you never know in the beginning if it's going to be successful. It's more about yes, I'm ready to push forward. I'm ready to put extra effort, and then just evaluation of kind of even Mighty Buildings as an example, right? All the founders went to the industry without prior background in construction.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the same for.
There's part passion is what you're identifying. I guess part opportunity too, but also it doesn't have to necessarily build off of past experience is something that you've noticed.
Yeah, I like 6 company meaning also ability to attract talent and learn from them. Right, it's also very important. It's all about the team, and I mean, out of the 6 companies, I would it's not all my ideas, right, or my eureka moments. It's more conversations, and at some point we came to kind of oh, that might be interesting to explore, right? And to be frank, very early, whenever someone is creating something, it's very different. Let's say in 3 or 4 years. It's similar to kind of pre-seed. You believe in a startup founder, and by Series A and B, they kind of very different approach the market or even product.
Yeah. I was originally going to go first into Mighty Buildings, but now I kind of want to go the VC route. We'll sort of circle back to Mighty Buildings. I'm interested in, given this understanding of that it's part idea, but mostly team. It's the people that you're able to attract to the idea to help build this product. How does that change how, as a VC, you look at new startup ideas, especially early stage?
For early stage, I would say it's mostly evaluating kind of if the founder understands how the company what talent should be attracted for the company to scale, right? And at what stage, let's say, and asking questions oh, okay, well, what about your product team, right? how you see your product team, let's say by Series A, or what it's going to be, how the sales should be supported in Series B. Just in general, it shouldn't be like, the one formula that's going to be the truth in 3 years or 4 years, but at least the founder should have thinking about it rather than saying like, oh yeah, I have a stellar team, we'll manage it. In some cases, even this scenario might work, right? So there might be like SaaS company that needs only, 10 people, for instance, right? And the sales are happening already, but it's very rare, majority of cases. So thinking about like what should be the next stage, who I should be attracting to the company to make sure that they will be up to speed within half a year, it's very, very important.
So do you prioritize like the ability for the founder to network and attract talent almost higher than other characteristics of a founder?
I would say it's a mix. Like it's very hard to predict in terms of if they're going to be right or wrong in terms of attracting different talent, right? Because talent on one end, another thing is kind of like interpersonal connectivity, and it's very hard to predict in terms of like how the team going to behave. I remember one of the executive coaches at a certain point told me like, think about it as a basketball, right? Whenever one basketball player is switching from one team to another, right, he's already by default a professional. No one going to teach him how to handle the ball and so on. The question is how he going to be performing well within the team. The same as kind of like me hiring some individual that's top professional and all the check boxes that I need, but if he's going to be as passionate about the vision as I am, or if he's going to be a good fit for the team, right? It's always a question, but at least having thinking type of thinking about that I need this talent, I need this skill set, then it's more a question for founders to be able letting go of people fast, hiring slow, all this.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting take because there's a huge emphasis often in, product market fit and the ability for the idea as it currently stands to really disrupt the market itself. But I think what you're highlighting is that it's really a dynamic thing throughout the entire course of the product, or I guess the company life. It depends on so many different factors of the people that come in, the ideas that are imparted, and how that actually morphs. So I guess that makes it even more challenging almost to be able to predict future success, because you have to anticipate the market changes and the interpersonal changes. Do you have any advice for founders or aspirational entrepreneurs that want to create something successful? Should they start curating a network in a specific area now before they start their endeavor? How do you go about building the dream team?
Well, being a part of, I would say, my first company, I started when I was in university. And the reason why it went more or less well, I would say, is because when I went back to the university, it was back in Russia, and I was getting back to the lectures, and I was saying to my friends like, hey, what's going to be fun? Making money and work with friends, right? So, and that's how I ended up we had a team of 5 people, and they all were from the same kind of cohort. I was spending with them during the daytime and evening time, we were building something. So that was access to the talent, right? And I think for most of the fund, they need to have some sort of people that they have access to, and they will be willing to jump in, or at least they will not end up huge amount of time hiring the best talent. Yeah. And best talent might vary, right? Best talent for Series B is very different than talent for seed stage company. Very, very different skill set. So I would say one thing is kind of where people are coming from, because in some cases, right? So if the person is coming from some successful startup, likely he has access to the people that he worked with for many years, right? If it's university, it might be university and so on. So that's also very important. rather than saying like, oh yeah, we're going to use a recruiting firm and they will help us to hire. It's, I mean, it's for pre-seed and seed stage, I would say it's very, very challenging. Another important part is, and you ask about this in terms of like, is it important to get the prior experience within this sphere or like this field? Potentially yes. On the other hand, in some cases, no. I remember like, I gave speech to in front of the students for USC, and advice from a person before me was like, guys, don't rush and start your companies or your business, like, get real kind of like experience. And then there was my speech, and I'm like, I haven't done it. So I said like, yeah, for sure, but there's another scenario that might also work for you. So it really depends. And I would get back to passion. If the person, the founder, is passionate about the problem, then in this case, I would say like, go. Because in this case, the motivation to learn about that will be way faster and quicker. But on contrary, there is a lot of examples where the founder actually coming from the field that he knows well, and he just tries to resolve the problem. That's also a very good scenario.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay, so
there is
both are viable, then there's no right or wrong,
both,
I guess.
Yes, so there's no advice. I would say like the problem comes first, passion, and be able to push through. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Alexey, that's really interesting, and I think we agree in general. Like passion leads to determination, which is grit and is one of the most important factors of success. I want to double click for a second on, and then I think we should probably move on, but on the network, like having the network, being either a seasoned professional or a serial entrepreneur, and how that can accelerate early, and if you're not one of those two, maybe like bringing in someone, especially what I've seen really good success is in BD, like someone in the industry, enterprise BD in particular, which I think you need to deal with. So curious on your opinion there.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's typically like, if it's just an idea, so start looking for a co-founder, right? Someone who you're going to trust and who will be complementary in terms of like either access to talent or something else, right? I see a lot of scenarios, like in cases, I would say like, pre-seed company founder has like, a couple of people very business oriented, which is good. But like in, sort of like technical expertise. So they're looking for CTO, technical officer with sort of like OVP of engineering with access to talent, right? And before then, until there is a good credentials for these founders, like, a lot of VCs will just say, no, it's just too high risk, right? Even like, in angel investors too. The other scenario is like, more typical, like, in some cases, I wouldn't say like, who is like more in terms of percentages. Whenever like, more technical team is kind of like, oh yeah, we'll figure it out. But then the question is like, how they get into product market fit, right? Because it's kind of people still making a lot of mistakes related to kind of, okay, let's build product and then we know how to resolve the problem. No, it doesn't work that way, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. So when you have such a variety of founder personas that you look for, and there's so many different facets, how do you scale your impact within the startups that you choose to invest into? Is it ones that you typically see, like you see an opportunity where, given your experience, you can help them in a specific way, or is there any scalability factor that you can provide through your VC, or is it very custom from what you found?
What do you mean by scalability as a VC?
I think one of the benefits of being a VC, as I see it, is that if you pick a very specific vertical with a very specific thesis and sector and stage, there are a lot of learnings that can be transferred very quickly across your entire portfolio, whether it be how to find which early customers are actually good, or which ones are kind of just pulling your leg and like actually not going to get you to an ARR target that is meaningful for venture. Learnings like that, I think, are helpful. At least that's how we've built Omni, is that we have a lot of those like really key, hard to access learnings. and are able to share those across our whole portfolio so they can help accelerate. If the strategy that you're showing is like success can be anywhere, and there are so many different founder personas, different founder types that can be successful, is there a way to scale your impact as a VC across your portfolio?
Look, let's get back. I think it's probably will be one of your questions related how BuildTech started in general.
Yeah.
Because just to answer this question, it will be important to understand where BuildTech is coming from. Mm-hmm. So BuildTech, initially when I have been doing angel investment for a while, and before that I funded a number of companies outside of construction tech and real estate technology. So at a certain point, we decided okay, let's maybe invest in a company that will help Mighty Buildings to grow within a couple of years. Because if we think about Mighty Buildings, it's, we use material science, robotics, automation, production, and we previously were doing more B2C model, and we're literally were exposed to every problem, starting from mixing the material to actually giving the key to a customer. And I mean, construction is very fragmented, siloed industry in general. So there is many inefficiencies. So then I started exploring the companies, and I tried to we supported 2 companies, invested in them with the idea that they will help Mighty Buildings in 2 or 3 years. I even had an idea of creating a fund related within Mighty Buildings to build Mighty ecosystem. Oh, wow. To just solve my problems that I have in a horizon of 2 or 3 years. Obviously, this idea didn't crystallize, but because it will be hard to get funding for Mighty specific or from investors from our cap table to fund something, because it's business for our investors. But then but I decided okay, I do investments. I will focus on construction technology and real estate technology. And I kept running this idea by my friends. And by that time, my close circle was already people from construction technology and or owners of this, with experience in construction. So, and many of those told me hey, we would like to co-invest with you. So that's how BuildTech Syndicate became the reality. Mm-hmm. And again, my filter for everyone listening in BuildTech as a syndicate was people with real experience in construction. So I don't have pure angel investors or VCs. That's why BuildTech, first of all, is an ecosystem, right? So people who can bring value to these founders. And I also do very lazy due diligence, to be frank, because in majority of cases, I'm just asking okay, I got the idea. It looks interesting, promising. So then next, I'm asking who you targeting right now, mm-hmm. who your potential customers are. And I try to find within my network, within BuildTech network, someone who can become a customer and pilot. Then I observe. That's how I see them performing. First of all, from handling customer perspective. I mean, I had both stellar performance on how to handle when the product is poor, very underdeveloped, to the degree, even MVP-ish stage, and the customer was happy, and we're okay, wow, we need to support them, they will figure it out. To the other end of spectrum, where the product was ready, is actually good, but the way they handle the customer was no go.
Interesting.
So that's kind of in terms of how we support, we typically try. I have multiple access to multiple I would say, I don't know, sizes or grade of construction companies. And in some cases, it's more connecting them and figuring out if they have this problem and they're willing to talk, and then figure out if they're doing a pilot or they want to do a project together.
Yeah, that's incredibly valuable. And it ties into a future question that I had around how do you manage both the startup and the VC? But as you're saying, they're really hand in hand. And the ability to connect your potential portfolio companies with early customers is beneficial, not just for the startup even, but also for you to sort of vet how they make that connection. I have small anecdote, actually. This strategy that you're proposing is kind of an age-old one done by like the Kleiner Perkins and Sequoias even back in the 90s. I had an anecdote from a founder that was building that time frame for years, was trying to sell to Cisco specifically. It was the biggest fish inside of the market and could not get into the organization. But after meeting with Sequoia's like, I want to do due diligence. Please talk to Cisco because, we don't really know how good your technology is. And they went right through the front door and were able to do that pitch, and they got a deal. So it's actually a incredibly important strategy. And especially because your build tech is very niche inside of the construction world, you have all of those connections kind of at your fingertips. I'm a huge fan of the strategy. I think your portfolio companies are quite lucky to get even just through the due diligence stage with you guys.
Yeah. And I have also like one story related to one portfolio company called Bundle. Mm-hmm. So Bundle was introduced to me as by two investors from Mighty Buildings Cup Table. They just reached out and asking like, oh, what do you think about this company? So they will pre-seed. I would not disclose like, what was the strategy back then, but in general, my response was like, 50-50, I don't know. But I decided as a sidetrack to send this deck to my supply chain team at Mighty Buildings, and I forgot about it. So I provide my comments and that's it. Half a year later, I was passing by the desk of one of my colleagues, and I asked and I saw the blank piece of paper with the logo of this company, with Bundle, and I forgot about about them, and I asked hey, what is that? He said this is an invoice from Bundle. Remember, you introduced the company a half a year ago, and we became a customer. I'm like, really? 90 is a customer? They said, yeah, we were happy with their services and so on. So, I mean, no brainer, Build Tech invested.
Oh, that's incredible. It's so funny that the small things that you do in your day-to-day, you don't know how they'll pan out in 6 months. I guess it's kind of the chance and luck. I mean, you build your own luck, but I guess you never really know what'll pan out. I wanted to circle the conversation back a little bit to something that we were chatting about earlier. You mentioned there was a relatively strong difference between a founder and an entrepreneur. Can you walk us through the differences between those?
So entrepreneur is someone who basically wants to start business, right? I mean, more business where founder will, in majority of cases, founder's mentality is kind of creating something new, right? And I think entrepreneur can see world from perspective of opportunities. I mean, the thing is not all founders entrepreneurs, and not all entrepreneurs founders. Mm-hmm. Because let's say some entrepreneurs are being very successful in just creating picking the best spots for coffee shops, right?
Yeah,
it's successful, right? And it's great. Founder in this scenario is more comfortable, less operating and keeping this business running, but more starting things, and maybe at certain phase, okay, the business is now self-sufficient. I will do something new, or keep pushing it if the vision is still not there. And entrepreneurial mindset is, I would say, more about building something that's going to be as a business from business perspective, right? Where the founder's mentality is more about here's a vision, and we need to push toward this vision, and the pathway might be very, very unpredictable.
Yeah. And so do you have any advice for aspirational people that want to get into this lifestyle? They have heard that, it's a great way to sort of build the future that you want to see. Do you have any advice for how to curate the mindset of more of a true founder than an entrepreneur, and what you can do to sort of build yourself up to prepare for this as you're beginning to speak with VCs?
I think learning one of the things, try to become quick learner and be genius inquiry about all the information possible. And questioning all the facts and things that are being presented. Like in some cases, even in construction, for instance, right, there is building codes. And I remember like there was a conversation with one of my engineers, and he was presenting to me like, here what it should be. And there was some number that was provided by the building code. No one was questioning where is the numbers coming from. And I said like, why is this, 3 and not like, 1.5? No one was able to answer me, right? So they spent like 2 weeks on trying to find, and that might be like the solution. But on the contrary, right? So I think it's another thing that's very important is ability to move fast and making decisions. In some cases, I mean, not in some cases, the majority of cases, decisions are not going to be right. But it's more about, I like, what Jeff Bezos proposed, right? There is irreversible decisions and reversible decisions, right? Reversible decisions, make them fast as soon as possible. Irreversible, spend some time to the analytics, right? But on the other hand, like, don't be paralyzed with all this analytics. In some cases, it's try to listen to your gut feel and intuition. And then hear, like, and feel what other people think about it, right? Because it's very easy to be trapped in kind of like, that's my comfort zone, and people are presenting me all the information that I need, right? I need to break out and see, like, even in conversation with investors, I remember this advice from Michael Zibel from YC. He said, like, your first slide should be very insightful and not presenting like a traditional, here are the problem in the industry. I remember he said, like, bring the fact that is not obvious to anyone, and you'll be, as a president, it's anchor for the intention, right? So that's also the thinking that's saying, like, no, did you know that this, right? But as a founder, you also need to ask these questions, where in a different situations, asking, like, oh, tell me, like, teach me, and so on.
Alexey,
yeah.
Sorry, Sabrina.
Go for it, Simon.
We see founders that move really fast, and then other founders that want to their actions to be very thoughtful and perfect, right? And it's kind of a different approach. And how do you? I'm sure you've worked with both. I'd be curious, like, which are you, and then how do you balance that with co-founders? Like, move fast and break things versus, move more cautiously, I guess.
Well, it's an interesting topic, right? So I think it more depends on maturity of the product. Like, if it's a pre-product market fit, I remember, like, one guy was raising money for something related to space, and he said, like, it's important to raise money for 4 launches of the rocket. It's like 4 iterations. If it's not going to work after 4, like, and it doesn't matter if it's luck or if it's technology, it just doesn't matter. Like, the same theme, I think, can be applicable to any strategy, right? The number iteration, the hypothesis you're able to test within a shorter time frame, the better, right? There is a huge number of constraints, like, in the industry, if it's enterprise sales, everyone is afraid of enterprise sales, right? Enterprise sales typically will take, like, a year and a half or something like that, or even 2 years, and very hard to predict. But in this case, like, you're more leaning towards, like, is there an expertise in a team that can speak the same language with enterprise players, right? And understand all the kind of, like, dancing and the game between two. Similar to kind of, like, I think the anecdote related to Cisco, right? It was somewhat relevant to this, right? It's very hard to get there until you have a pathway of someone experienced getting into it. So on the other side, right, post-product market fit, and if there is a natural pull from the market, right? So number one is how to maintain this growth and how to actually build up on the growth, right? And typically, why companies introducing, like, new product lines or new features, because they want monetize more, right? And they're actually testing this hypothesis. So let's say there is a sales going on, right, in terms of revenue, and they want to get more. It's like introducing more features, like expanding your addressable market, like, your market can give you this kind of like, hockey stick growth. It's very rare to get like, one product and it will just boom like this. There is only a few on the market that were able to do so. So that whenever it's kind of like, there is a revenue generating like, product or features or services, then it's, yes, the core component the company should be careful about that. And I typically call it like the time to hire a chief financial officer, and he will be the whole protector and or like VP of finance, who will be protecting this kind of like, this scenario, saying like, we need to maintain this growth, like whatever to build on top is going to be approved by the board and will be driven by the executive team.
Yeah. There's a lot of, you have such a wealth of experience from building so many different startups and taking them to such a mature stage. I'm wondering, can you walk us through your, just like a time in which you yourself have experienced a pretty low from one of your startup experiences and how you were able to pivot and like rise out of that?
Oh, where to start? So I mean, low and pivoting. I'm just trying to like, because
you have a lot of experiences to pull from, so I can imagine.
Yeah. I mean, look, one example is actually like, from prior, like me moving to Germany, expanding the technology in Germany. So the reason for that, it was 2009, sorry. So 2009, before the streaming and so on, so I was working on technology to distribute digital content, meaning like on CDs and DVDs, and bring them directly to retail stores. Because back then, the like inventory for CDs and DVDs was going down, and it was not profitable to keep the whole catalog inventory, but the customer was still demanding this product. As before Netflix and Blockbuster. Or like during the times, but it was in Europe, right? Europe was still So we were building this technology, and the reason why I moved this thing to Germany, because on Eastern Europe, everyone was using like, legal sources of content. And it was very hard to like, there was an interest to go to the retail store just to pick like, the items and then download them at home. So in Germany, it was different. So that's kind of like, and it was very low, but honestly speaking, it happened like it was very random, because one of the advisors to the company said like, and back then we were focusing on gaming, on gaming industry. And one of the advisors said like, go for Gamescom. I think, Simon, you visited Gamescom last year, as I remember, right?
Yeah.
So I was actually exhibitor and presenting my technology on the very first Gamescom in 2009 in Köln. And the reason why I was there, and it was a wild shot, right? So the advisor said like, try Gamescom. It's going to be the first one. After that, there will be a lot of attention. And I think like when I went to Gamescom, that was a product market fit, because I remember this guy. He was from Czech Republic, and he owned like number of the chain of his content distribution for games. And he came to me. He said like, Alexey, I have my limit for ATM is 5,000 euro per day. I can give you the deposit for 15,000 euro over 3 days of this event, and by the end of the year, I need this machine. And I'm like,
Dang.
Looks like product market fit, right?
Wow.
That's one example. Honestly, other lows are, for instance, but again, this idea was temporary, because as you can imagine, at a certain point, I remember we had like a chain of these machines across Europe. About 2012, beginning of 2012, I went to the conference, like not the conference, but the show, like, in Netherlands, related to digital distribution of the content. And the majority of innovation booths or the category was about DRM, so protection of the content, and streaming. So I went back to my investors saying like, time is up. Let's close everything, get my money out of it. And that was the right call, right? But on the other hand, I felt like, on the way back, my head was like low. Luckily, I started another company back then on the background, just, because of AD came through. The rest of lows, I would say, were more related to market, for instance, right, when COVID hit, right, and we built homes. We just moved from Redwood City to Auckland, and we were about to ship like the first unit. Then COVID hit, and the permittings were delayed, and so on. So we let go a number of people. But then the market started picking up, right? So, and we were very lean. I think in situations of being low, it's a very good moment to kind of start thinking of okay, what I need, what hypothesis I truly need to validate to make sure that it's no go or it's going to work. Because as I mentioned, I also started a number of companies, and after, let's say, 6 or 9 months spending some, bootstrapping it was clear, I just need to kill it. It doesn't work. Or I lost my passion to push it through, right? Until as soon as there is a passion, it doesn't matter how low because of external circumstances. And I mentioned I cannot control illegal content distribution back in 2009. I cannot control Netflix and streaming being going up. I cannot control COVID or interest rate. But on the other hand, I always can control where my focus is. And if my passion is dedicated towards I believe that I believe the construction is still deserve synthetic materials that are more efficient, sustainable, and faster to build. I still believe that construction industry deserves a huge amount of changes. That's why Build Tech exists, and we invest in a company that can transform the industry from different aspects. And that's what driving me, right? So I think lows are very good to reflect and think okay, what are the 3 top things that I need to focus on, and cut everything else.
Yeah. I really like that lens. I think that it often feels like an insurmountable hurdle at the point where you realize that there's a big problem with your strategy and the market, and it is an incredible time for an inflection point or a change of some kind. I really admire your ability to know when it's time to call it quits versus when it's time to persevere. I think that the example of the Netflix rising in prominence is a very interesting one compared to construction tech, where despite COVID, you knew it was going to be temporary and something that still has long legs, even after this blip in sort of the global economy.
Don't get me wrong. I didn't know that it was temporary. It was.
Oh yeah. Hindsight,
remember the times of beginning of 2020, no one knew that's and really the long pause from all the venture firms, what's going to happen with the market.
Yeah. Did you actually, I'm interested in double clicking on how that period really played out. Did you need a fundraise during that period of time at all? Or did you have enough fun? You did also. Okay. So market hit, you had your first build that was delayed due to permitting, and then you needed to fundraise from that period of time. That sounds incredibly stressful. How did that, it obviously ended up panning out well, but would you have changed any of your course of action in the face of that really recent very challenging decision-making period? Do you have any regrets or anything that you would have done differently?
Interesting fact about me regrets, and if I change anything, I think it's just wrong way of thinking from my perspective. It's always very hard for me to answer these questions, because I remember on some of the dinners that I've been invited by general partners of different firms, and they're surround with the founders, and they like to ask question oh, what do you regret about decisions that you made for the company? I'm a huge amount, probably, but on the other hand, they all drove to where we are right now with all the learnings, because you never know what is going to be if I change the decision, right? So what's going to be the learning in this case? Maybe yes, maybe it's going to be more successful, maybe no. So, but I think it's more important to think about where I am right now, what's tactically important as a next step to get where I need to be within year and a half, and what is my vision. I like the framework from McKinsey, and I know some, and I told it to you early on. Remember these 3 horizons in terms of the way of thinking and framing the meeting with other executive and peers. It's
been game changing for us. It's really good. Seriously, no, really, we've used it with many portfolio companies. Yeah, for anyone, maybe you can give a quick overview of it, because I think it's a really, really cool visual that helps set the stage for different types of meetings and make people realize that different types of meetings need different types of horizons, and setting that stage is important. Yeah, would love for you to just quickly explain it.
Yeah, so explanation in terms of how to visualize it, it's very simple. So the first one, imagine that you're on a hike, right? And you're going to the top of the hill or the mountain, whenever you prefer. So the first horizon is sort of what I see right now, some obstacles that I need to go around to, or adjust my route a little bit. Second horizon is, and for the meetings, it's in some cases it's very important to frame right now we focus only on this kind of what are the things that we need to implement within 3 months or 6 months, depending on your target. Next one is we know where we're heading to the top of the hill, right? And we see it, we can visualize it. So that's the second horizon. So I have a goal, I move in there. And that's also very important, saying now we discuss this, we know where we're heading, we discuss in the route, right? Obviously, we cannot predict all the stones that we need to step, all the, trees that fall on the way, but that's manageable. The third one is a vision, right? The third horizon is when I'm on the top of the hill, I don't know what I'm going to see, but I can visualize. And that's very important exercise, right? That's where there might be a rainbow, there might be another another mountain, or there might be a cliff, right? But it's very important to visualize, because if the setting is not set right for one of these horizons, in this case, some people will have tendency to speak only about the third horizon, and other people will connect the first one to the third one, and everyone will get lost.
An R&D team meeting with an execution team. The R&D team by default will think horizon 2 or 3 in a typical meeting, whereas the execution team will be thinking horizon 1, maybe 2, right? So setting the stage, okay, guys, we're talking about what we need to get done in the next, few months. That's horizon 1. No, now we're talking about goals for the next year or 2. That's horizon 2. Or we're talking about the big vision of the company, the TAM, how do we get investors excited? How are we going to become a unicorn? That's horizon 3. And for anyone wanting to read or learn more about this, you can just Google. McKinsey, I think, invented it, right? And they have articles, at least many articles. So McKinsey, not a big proponent of consulting companies, but this is a cool kind of analogy, storytelling analogy. You can just Google McKinsey 3 horizons, and it's the top result. Yeah, so thanks so much, Alexey, for that tidbit of wisdom.
Yeah.
How have you integrated that into Mighty Building so far? At what point do you introduce the horizons conversation with your team in the life cycle of a startup? And then how do you actually circle back to guiding the team to hit those goals?
I think, honestly speaking, it's not been consistent on my end. So to be frank, so I think I can do better. The only thing I would say, I prefer to structure my internal updates for the team in such a manner. So give it a heads up that, okay, these are the important topics that we need for tactical, right? And there is a certain kind of time frame, and that's the focus, right? In some cases, it just pivoting the conversation towards look, we need to discuss the next 2 quarters, right? Let's focus on deliverables and things that we can achieve and are manageable within 2 quarters. We know that there might be consequences that will impact the other stage, but it should be a separate conversation. So such a manner, I mean, in some conversations, yes, whoever feels kind of comfortable just framing it and naming it, saying like, okay, right now we discuss the second horizon, right? So let's focus on this. That works. But in a large group, typically I just, steer the conversation towards this.
Yeah, use it as like a background kind of like goal setting point for people to sort of align their efforts. Makes complete sense. Yeah, it's been really valuable for a bunch of portfolio companies and a very good theme to be operating on. I think that you've curated so many interesting learnings from the experience that you've had through startup and how you're able to apply them to new companies that you invest into. I was wondering if you'd be open to speaking about how you evolved as a person from like your very first startup that you created back in college to today, and how has your leadership style changed at all from that level of experience? And how have you adapted, I guess, the style of how you're able to get everything done from like your first one to now?
Definitely changed a lot. It changed from like, free control to rely on kind of like more so intuition and feelings, like, from like, to this spectrum. Because I mean, when I just started, I wouldn't say like, compared to now, probably I will quantify myself as a free control back then, because I wanted to kind of like, and look, it's 2006, 2007, right? So it's agile was just, not that, agile was there, but it was not publicized in terms of the frameworks, the ceramics, and so on. So it's more about like everyone was about like, project management. There was a funny story. I was fundraising, and I remember 2007 or 8, I was presenting the Gantt chart to one of the investors, and he was requesting for utilization of different resources. And my assumption was that the people can grow, and I was presenting to him that the utilization of some people can go up, like 150 or something like that. And he was saying, well, no, it's impossible. You cannot do that. So like, look, I hire students. They grow like as rockets, like literally, like they able to learn and perform more. So that's why, like I believe that in a year they will be accomplished 150% more compared to now. Okay. And he was like, no, you need to different, like So the thing is that I was trying to like put all the tasks and buckets in a different kind of like more structure, but in the same time I was accounting for people to grow by default, right? And I think one of the important part that was probably like as a common theme throughout my I would say personal development, help people to grow, understand where their motivation, because in some cases, I see a person who, let's say, coming to me presenting some idea. I might not believe in the idea, but I see so much passion and he's like so willing to do it that probably I would say like if I have doubt, or like if I have any kind of like chance that it might be valuable, I will give it a green light. I would say like, okay, let's test it, let's try it. Like what do you need? Let's try to write it down and so on. So I would say like letting people do and follow their passion is the most important part, because that's where they will amaze with the outcome.
It's so interesting. Yeah, sorry, go for it for Simon. I'll add after.
We need like a little sign.
Yeah.
Alexey, how do you differentiate between believing in believing in the idea because the founder is so passionate about it, from believing in the founder and trying to maybe have him shift or pivot his idea towards something that from your experience is better? Or have you encountered that? I'm just curious on the differences there. Because normally I've thought about, okay, this founder is amazing, let's invest in him, And
But there's a huge difference, right? So the question
Okay.
was about like, my style as a leader or like, my personal development, right? So my personal development, letting people grow and believing in their ideas within the vision that's created by the founders, it's one thing, right? And your question is about the founder's ability to kind of like, pivot. That's what I call resilience, right? And another thing is probably is productive paranoia is very good. So start thinking about like, why your idea is not gonna work, right? And start like little tests, right? And I think it's quite common for a lot of people kind of try to do the same thing like over and over again, right? Like, it's supposed to work, it's supposed to work. No, think about something different, right? In some cases, people, and I think it's more about resilience and not saying, in some of my conversations with the founders, let's say let's say we as a build tech, we're saying like, not yet. I mean, it's let's keep in touch and so on. And if in 3 months and 6 months the traction is not there, they're still struggling, I'm saying like, maybe it's time to test like a different hypothesis and different have you thought about other segments. So my questions become more sort of like, okay, what you have tested throughout the time, right? And if I hear that they tested, yeah, they're very passionate, the idea might work, but then to be honest, in 30 or like 50% of such cases are saying like, maybe you don't need venture investment, right? You need maybe to get money from other investors that are okay with kind of like, just business. I wouldn't say like just business, but, more common kind of like, growth, not the venture type growth.
I think I like the idea that not everything is venture scalable, and the fact that I love the concept actually of productive paranoia. And it kind of, over the experiences that we shared just in this podcast, understanding how to predict the market and allowing yourself to understand why something will fail is as important as understanding how to try to make it successful. How do you recommend founders like break up their time into taking chunks of time to understand like failure modes for what they're building versus success, like, and to like bake that into their schedules to like understand the market landscape? Or is that something, do you have a strategy given all of your companies so far that you found that works for you?
Ooh, tough question. I think it's like the first thing in my mind was like, whatever works for you. But it shouldn't be like, always try the same things over and over again. In terms of like, break, there's another, how it's called? I think there's a book called Vivid Vision or something like that. It's the idea is get with the phone, like, get with your co-founders and try to write a vision for the company that's going to be how it should look like in 3 years and 5 years. What problems you as a founders or executives are going to have, what problems should be resolved by them, and revisit it like, early stage. I think it's important to revisit it like, once, at least I would say like every half a year, like better 3 months.
Yeah.
Just to review it. And again, it's more like get together. I mean, later on, OKRs will step in, I think, or like whenever method, because like all the businesses with the maturity leaning towards like quarterly planning, right? So it will happen organically. But this sort of like vision of the company, where it should be in 3 years, in 5 years, it's very important to revisit it. And again, not to think about it as a kind of like, the beautiful picture, but think about it like what problems I'm going to have in 3 years, what problems I'm not going to have in 3 years, right? And then do the gut check in terms of like, are you progressing toward this? Are we accounting for the problem that we're going to resolve? Or there is a new set of problems? Because it's, so I would say like, do exercises like this in all the lows, remember like your question. So I think it's also very important to start crafting different scenarios at this point, right? From the extremes, meaning like, everything is, not going to work. What's going to be the case? And like, what is the most optimistic in some of the scenarios in between? And then have this conversation openly with the executive or like, founding team.
And keep putting those checkpoints in. Incredible. Alexey, you have so much wisdom with all of your experiences. We're very excited about both Mighty Buildings and Build Tech. We wanted to end on a final question. And that question is, who has been the most impactful person in your professional journey so far?
I think my first investor, that's to be honest, because there's a funny story related to that. It will take 3 minutes.
No, go for it.
So on the second year of university, very young, what was 19 or 20 years old, I was thinking okay, I want independence. I want kind of go and make money. So I went for a couple of interviews, and I understood that it's not kind of that's something that I'm passionate about. So the second idea was, okay, let me start the business. So I registered the company, I registered some of the bank account and blah, blah, blah. And then I thought oh, maybe I will go and learn from people by being interviewed. They will interview me, but I will learn about the business. So my mentality was, I don't care what they do and how the interview will result in anything. I was just going there and learning how they operate. So I remember one of the interviews, the guy was interviewing me, and there was a second person who I thought was I don't know, my bar was very low about him, to be frank. And if he will be listening, he knows the story. So and the other guy was interviewing me, and I said I went just ballistic on his business model. Literally, I was saying this should be done differently. I will do this differently, blah blah blah. So a week later, the other guy who I have very low bar, he called me and said hey, I think what you're saying is very interesting. How about we create the company, and I invite you to run it. I'm like, hell yeah!
Wow.
Why not? And to be frank, being young and with this, it's like an opportunity, right? So I took this opportunity, but I learned a lot from him, and I would say that he was the most impactful for many years, supporting my first and second businesses.
That's incredible. Cheers to him. Very excited to have people like that sort of supporting your early career and have really shaped all of the successes that you've had to date. So cheers to him.
Yeah, thank you.
Cheers. Last drop of Michelada down. Okay. Awesome. It's been awesome, Alexey, and it's been really incredible building our relationship over the last few years. So really proud to have you and humbled to have you here on our podcast. Thank you so much for your time. And thanks everyone for watching. This has been Beers with VCs with Alexey Dubov. See you next time.